Welcome to a couple of monkeys. In the last couple of years, my family has had a lot of losses. Starting with my mother, and then my father, and then my uncle. I ended up being lucky enough to capture some recordings with my mother, my father, and my uncle. My Aunt Sherry was really interested in commissioning a photo frame of my uncle and aunt, and we could surprise the family with it later. After I was done with the commission, I asked her if she felt that the family would mind if I share a small recording. She didn't feel that there would be any issues, and she thinks the family would love it. So hopefully this is me not burning down some bridges with my relatives. I hope you enjoy getting to know the wonderful person that my Uncle Ted was, while I work on this present for my family.
I just been very fortunate because, I got my first job when I was 11 years old.
I beat you.
And
I was 8.
So,
Sounds like Uncle Ted had more fun.
At Truesdale, I can remember what happened. Mom got this phone call that somebody broke into their shed, Truesdale shed, to some neighborhood kids. And he was calling around to find out, because where I was, because was I with a gang in the neighborhood. And Mom said, no, he's been right here and everything. And so they got to talking or something, and Mom said, well, he didn't break it, but you could pay him to help fix it back up. So I got a job. I was either 10 or 11 years old. Well, part of it was the fact that Mom was mad at me and Dad was mad at me because they didn't have much money. And my mom bought me orange corduroy pants. And so I didn't want them, and Dad said, get a job if you don't like it. And so Mom got me the job. So I worked for them for years. And so first I started working with doing their lawns and fixing things up, and then I started working with their tractors and doing fencing, and then they got cows and I worked with cows, and by knowing them, Jimmy Reesner had me come and work for him, and then we had Medcaps who used the old-fashioned hay piles, and his wife was so mean she tried to fork me many times with a pitchfork.
Yeah. That
kind of forking. And so it just turned into other jobs, and then it was Johnson's that lived across the street.
Yeah, you did that, and then you worked at Sanborn's delivering groceries.
I worked at Sanborn's. I worked at the elementary school. I worked at Truesdale's garage, which was right there where that mattress factory place is, right now across from Sabre Plaza. And then I worked with Hamo on jobs. Yeah. And then we did the tree trimming.
Truck. Yeah, you did the feed store truck delivering.
Yeah. And so
flour to Matson's Donuts.
Yes. And so I had all these jobs, and it just seems like when you get a job, you fall into another job, and then I went on to the lakes, and then when you get laid off for a couple of months in the wintertime, then that's when I did bartending and worked at a motorcycle shop in Florida, worked at restaurants, parked cars, did all that kind of stuff. And then I ended up in Vegas and worked out there and worked for a Volkswagen place out there and worked for a motorcycle shop, worked for the Mint 400 or Mint Casino, did some part-time work for Universal Studios on a couple of movies, working on Volkswagens. Just always finding jobs. It just seemed like you couldn't have just one job. It just turned out craziness. It was hard for me to turn down money.
Yeah.
People would say, can you do this? And I'd say yes. And then I'd have to ask somebody, how am I supposed to do that? I've never done that before. I told them I could, so.
That was before YouTube, so you could look it up on YouTube.
Yeah. And so I can still remember just, people said, can you do this? I just did it. And it was like, a lot of times I was working for somebody else and they'd see me working and then they'd come over and say, hey, you're doing a good job here. you work for me, and it's like, why not? So
Yeah, you were always busy.
always had a job, but it just was one of those things you just fall into it. And then the rescue squad, you know, that helped me get my job at Ashcraft. So you always, you know, you never know what's going to happen. It just falls in your lap. So I don't know what else to say. I've had lots of different jobs, and if I didn't enjoy them, I went somewhere else.
But you also did motorcycle racings. You used to buy old, the old stuff off of other people.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know, the richer people, they would run one time around the track or something like that, and then they would throw away their tires, and you'd grab up their old tires.
And then there was an old motorcycle shop out there, right across from Sabre Plaza. It was Bartram's old motorcycle shop, and there was an Indian shop before him, and it was like the lost civilization. They had a basement that nobody had been in years, and I found it was full of old Indian motorcycle parts. And through a woman that I met at Nelson's Ledges, she had a brother that lives in California that worked on all the movie stars' old Indian motorcycles. And so I would send him parts out there, a few at a time, and then he would send me money. So for years I was digging through like trash in this old basement because the place was falling down. Nobody was out there. Nobody knew what was there because parts would be rusty, and I'd have to wire brush them, and I didn't even know what they were. I'd send them to California to Dick Stark, and he would send me a check, and I had no idea what the parts were worth or anything. He just sent me money, and all I had was a few hours labor and digging through all this trash. That was kind of a neat job.
Stealing.
Pardon?
Stealing.
Oh no, the guy, they knew what. They told me to go in there because they were gonna level the building someday. So he said, "Go, you have anything you want in there?" We found a backhoe in there. After digging, found a backhoe, and Pete Wing bought the backhoe. I found it, and he bought it. Had a hell of a time, and it sat there for 30 years, I think, and they couldn't get the clutch to let go. He towed it all around with another tractor, finally got the clutch to break loose. He had that backhoe for years. He didn't pay crap for the thing because it wasn't running, and they couldn't even move it because it was locked in gear. Yeah, we had a heck of a time loading it on a trailer. And yeah, the guy died, and then the guy put it was for a sweeper repair place for a while. You know, it's like that whole complex right there was so junky.
Where Sherman Williams
Yeah,
is
where
now.
Sherman Williams is, and it was such a rat trap. And the guy said, you know, you guys just go ahead and clean it out. I'm gonna have to level this place, but you know, just go ahead and take whatever you want out of here. So I did. So I made a lot of money on Indian parts, and I don't know if I got screwed or what because I never questioned it.
Oh heck, you could have probably held on to them a little longer and sold
Well,
them.
they're worth a lot now.
Yeah.
Anything Indian.
So
Well, Indians started back up, but they're completely different now.
yeah, they're
Yeah,
completely
not
different.
like those.
Yeah, it was one of the motorcycle riders that had cancer, and so he was in a 24-hour race, and we used to have to tape his hands to the handlebars with duct tape so he could race. It was his last year.
Well,
And he was in bad shape, and so we put sugar cubes in his mouth, put a bunch of sugar cubes in his mouth, and put his helmet down, and he'd go out and he'd ride as fast as he could possibly go. And then we'd come in, we'd have to unduct tape him from the motorcycle because he just didn't have the strength to even hardly hold on. And then we'd put him in a sleeping bag, cover him up, and then give him sugar cubes again because he had a couple hours to rest, and his wife would go in there and keep him warm. And we put him back on the bike again, tape him on. Said, Dick, you know, you're gonna die if this bike goes down. He said, I'm gonna die anyways. So when the race was almost over with. The bikes were coming down the straightaway, and they were doing Ed Nelson about 160 miles an hour. He pops a wheelie at 160 miles an hour, and two more guys, they pop a wheelie, and there's a picture of these three bikes going over, 160 miles an hour on their back wheels. And he died a month later. And so the next big race was a couple months away, and it was just a weekend race. And his wife decided that she was going to spread his ashes out at the racetrack. So we went to the high back turn on the backside, and where it started the straightaway, she spread his ashes all along there. And so there was a bunch of us, half dozen guys maybe, that were part of that group. And so we knew it happened and that he was planted there. And so when the first race started, some freak thing happened, and a whole bunch of bikes went right off the road on that straightaway, right where his ashes were, and crashed right there. Not bad, but just, they don't know what happened. Just they went to the straightaway and just kept going straight. Never had it happen before. And Sally said, well, I guess we've planted his ashes and plowed him in. And so I saw her quite a bit after that. She had a Lotus Elan and a Jaguar XK 120 that was his. And then she moved out to California, and we kept in touch for a while. And she hung out with his brother, and that was how I started selling parts to his brother out there in California. Yeah, good old Nelson's Ledges.
You were there, Timmy, right?
Yep, I've been to Nelson's Ledges.
Yeah, because you went swimming and it was freezing.
And then I took you over to the track. You and Kara up to the track.
We didn't see much from what I remember.
Well, they weren't racing that day, but he let us go over the bridge, and John McGill let us go look around. So it was just kind of nice to see the history was still there. Yeah, a lot of good times were down there. We raced down there for about 5 years. I didn't race the big bikes. I raced a 125 and just had fun. And I raced my Formula V down there. That Formula V, that was PJ and Don were building that car, if you remember correctly, Sheila.
I don't remember.
Because I was working at the Volkswagen garage, and I was stealing parts out of the Volkswagen garage junkyard and sending them to PJ so he could build a car. And Don built the body, and I built the engine and transmission and everything, got all the stuff for him. And then after PJ was killed, then Bartram was really in financial trouble because she was an alcoholic and he was a pill popper, and so I loaned him money to make payroll, and he couldn't come up with the money, so I took the car, and that's how I ended up with the race car, and that's why I started racing that car. But the car, Don had changed it over and put a 750 Honda engine in it, took the Volkswagen out, and we were running Gymkhanas with it, and we had to take off in third gear because we burned the tires so bad, because the car only weighed 700 pounds. And the engine was a Honda engine with a bored out to 810 with a Yoshimura carburetors and the kit and Weber carbs on it. And it was unbelievable fast. But, so I ended up racing that for a while, but it was just too expensive. That's where I ended up getting the used tires from people, because to try to buy the latest tires and all the parts and stuff, it was just too expensive. I just go to the junkyard and buy something and put it on the car, and that was good enough for me. Because in racing, it doesn't matter. I mean, back then we sometimes had 40 cars in one field racing, and so only the guys that spent the big money could be up, 1, 2, 3. So if you could place anywhere in the top 10 with just stock stuff, You were just, it was amazing. So I prayed for rain. You're in a Formula car, you can't see, and it doesn't matter how much power you got, you're in the rain. So you just drive pretty blind because they're open wheel cars. So if you get behind somebody, you see nothing except like waterfalls. So you just try to aim to get around the car in front of you. And that's when I would do my best, is when it was raining, because I didn't have all the money to spend for all the stuff that other people did. But it was fun.
Thank you for watching this video.